Nobody.
Nobody reads short stories.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Megan.
And you're Hugh, and you're watching Nobody Read Short Stories.
Yes, welcome. So this is episode 3, season 2. We're very excited. So we're continuing with our eerie series tonight because Saturday is Halloween, and for those of you who are watching, I'm channeling my inner Freddie Mercury. And so because it is Halloween, the tonight's story is going to have some graphic imagery, and it's going to last about 40 minutes. So this is Station by Joshua Adams. Maria pulled off the interstate with her bladder screaming. The station was brightly lit, and she saw several vehicles parked at the pumps, even though it was 2 in the morning. Normally, she wouldn't stop at a station after dark. A woman traveling alone couldn't afford to take chances. But Maria had to pee so badly, it had become painful. When the bright, neon 24-hour gas and grub sign had appeared on the horizon, she couldn't resist its pull. She parked in an empty space close to the glass double doors. She didn't see an attendant at the counter, but Maria was pleased to find the station very clean and well kept. Hopefully, that would mean a more sanitary than average restroom. The agonizing urgency to urinate propelled her toward the alcove to the left of the beer coolers at the back of the store, where she saw the word restrooms displayed in neon red. The restroom was spotless, but at this point she wouldn't have cared if it had been crawling with roaches. Her agony gave way to relief as she finally emptied her aching bladder. On the heels of that pleasant release, though, Maria's subconscious began to speak up. She'd been so single-minded in purpose that she'd hardly focused on anything else upon entering the store. Now, as she stood washing her hands, Maria's interior alarms were beginning to ring. She remembered thinking it was odd that no attendant was at the counter when she'd come in, but had there been any customers in the store? Not any that she recalled seeing, and that was very odd, because there had been at least 7 vehicles parked outside. She'd been in a hurry, of course, but she was a pretty observant person, and she didn't remember seeing anyone standing at the tanks pumping gas. So where were they? Maria looked at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. Dark and curly hair pulled back in a tight bun, skin the color of coffee, hazel eyes. She was attractive, but not in a showy way. She didn't wear much makeup, although at the moment she felt like she could use some. Look at those bags under your eyes, girl, she thought. Maybe that was all that was to blame for the sudden case of the heebie-jeebies she was feeling. She'd been driving for 9 hours straight. She was exhausted. Maria splashed some cold water from the sink onto her face, then dried off with a paper towel. She made up her mind to open the door, walk as calmly as she could to her car, and get back on the road. The exit for the hospital where her dad was having his surgery was only another 35 miles away. Maria's mother had died when she was 5, killed in a head-on collision with an 18-wheeler. From that day forward, it had been just Maria and her dad against the world. The 3 years that she'd been at college was the only time in her life that she had been away from him. At first, the distance had felt unbearable, but gradually, a more independent, confident, even fierce young woman had emerged in Maria that she hadn't even known she could be. Then, around 3:30 yesterday afternoon, she'd gotten a call that her father had suffered a massive heart attack and would be having open heart surgery. She left immediately, gripped with panic. The whole drive had been a swirling torrent of crying, praying, and trying not to think about what losing him would do to her life. He was all Maria had. She had to get to him. She didn't have time for being scared. Maria shoved aside the queer uneasiness she was feeling, unlocked the bathroom door, and opened it. The station had changed. Where there had been bright lights, there was now just darkness, only partially dispelled by a single fluorescent bulb that dangled precariously from the ceiling. The light was flickering, and the strobe light effect it created made Maria feel queasy. The shelves that had been fully stocked with snacks and travel necessities when she'd entered the station were mostly empty now and covered with a thick blanket of dust and cobwebs. In fact, spider webs covered the entire ceiling and hung like drapes in every corner of the darkened space. Maria's mind reeled at the impossible sight. She turned to retreat back into the restroom, but she saw that room, too, now looked as though it had been abandoned for decades. Rust, grime, and dust covered every surface. Even the mirror in which she'd been studying her reflection had become etched with cracks and cloudy with old muck. A wave of nausea swept over her, but Maria fought against the urge to be sick. In a moment, the feeling passed. She retrieved her cell phone from her purse. The battery was fully charged, but there was no signal at all. She turned on the phone's flashlight and carefully made her way into the open room ahead. The station was very quiet, and she still had the sense that she was alone. All the same, she crept down the nearest aisle as quietly as possible. Keeping her head low, Maria slowly made her way to the front of the store. Cautiously peering around the corner of a cobweb-shrouded magazine rack, she glanced toward the large front windows at the parking lot. The trucks and cars were still there, parked by the pumps and looking for all the world like oddly shaped cows grazing in a field. These vehicles had changed in the same way as the station itself. When she pulled up to the gas and grub, the vehicles had looked ordinary, but now they were faded husks, overgrown with clinging vines and spackled with rust. Near the door of the station, she could hear her own car. She could see her own car, a silver Honda Civic, parked where she'd left it. Her car seemed unaffected by the changes wrought against the rest of the place. Out in the lot, a foot or so of grayish mist hovered over the greasy concrete, and the outdoor fluorescence glowed a dull, sickly green. All she needed to do was to get to her car and drive away from this awful nightmare. She didn't know what had happened, didn't really care. All Maria wanted was to leave. She stood and approached the door, then stopped abruptly. The vehicles weren't empty. If she strained her eyes, Maria could make out the dark silhouettes of drivers lurking behind grungy windshields. The truck at the pump nearest the front window of the store was one of those jacked up monstrosities with huge mud tires that Maria was fond of calling redneck wagons. The shadowy head of the form inside turned to face her. Twin pinpoints of fiery orange light glowed from the eye sockets of the dark face and locked onto her. Maria realized that all of the figures in the lot were looking at her now, and all of their eyes were blazing like hot coals. More silhouettes were emerging from the foggy darkness and surrounding the station on all sides. Their iridescent eyes created the unsettling effect of a candlelight vigil. Maria's heart was pounding. She'd never been so scared. She'd gotten all the way to the door before noticing the figures and was standing there frozen, her face inches from the glass. She was so focused on the vehicles and their occupants that she didn't notice the man that had stealthily approached the glass from her left side until he slapped his hand against the window and pressed his face to the glass. Maria fell away from the door with a shriek. The man at the window was a horror to behold. His clothes hung from his emaciated body in tatters. The man's skin was the color and texture of rotted eggplant, purplish black and mottled. Where his mouth had once been, there was now just a gaping black hole ringed with reddened, angry flesh that wept greenish pus. The man's scalp had split at the top of his head and was sagging across his brow. His eye sockets were caverns lit from within. It was as if his brains were on fire. Maria scooted backwards over the filthy tile floor until her back was pressed against a row of shelves, causing an avalanche of rusty cans that tumbled to the floor around her and rolled away in every direction. Her mind continued to insist that what she was seeing and experiencing couldn't possibly be real. All the while, her eyes and racing heart stubbornly testified that she was indeed living through a nightmare. Other figures, men, women, children, and oddly enough, a dog, were exiting the vehicles and approaching the front of the station. Each face was as hideous as the next, and each bore the same ragged, ravaged mouth and candlelit eyes. They pressed in close to the glass. The dog, it appeared to have once been a golden retriever, even raised up its hind legs, rested its front paws against the doorframe, and flattened its mangled snout against the glass. They all watched her in silence. but none of the things outside made any attempt to enter the station. Maria stood on shaky legs and stumbled to the front counter, then walked behind it. She began searching frantically underneath the counter for a baseball bat, a gun, anything she could use as a weapon, but found nothing. All the things' heads had turned in unison when she crossed to the counter. They followed her every move. She could feel the weight of their collective gaze and began to cry tears of fear and frustration. What were they? What did they want?
Well, don't mind them, little lady. Don't you
The
mind
voice
them
had come
one
from
bit.
behind her. Maria whirled to find the exit from behind the counter blocked by a strange-looking man. She hadn't heard him approach, and though she'd been looking at the figures outside the station, Maria felt sure she would have noticed someone sneaking through the door. This man had simply appeared behind her. She couldn't say how she knew it to be true, only that it was. A moment ago, she'd been alone in the store, and then in an instant, she wasn't. The man was shorter than Maria. He looked to be about 4.5 feet tall, but his posture was hunched over in a deceptive way. She had the sense that he was actually taller than he appeared. The man was oddly proportioned. He had a fat wedge-like torso, but his legs and arms were incredibly thin by contrast. He wore dark navy pants and a teal polo shirt with an embroidered Gas and Grub logo affixed to the right side of his chest. Beneath the logo was a pinned-on name tag that read Polk Ederkop. His clothing was as filthy as everything else in the station. The man had a head that seemed too large for his body. His complexion was very pallid, and not just because of the harsh light from her phone. His skin was pale as porcelain and was nearly translucent. Maria could barely see faint, bluish-gray blood vessels through the surface of the man's skin. His eyes were bulging, unblinking, and wrong in some way. After a moment, Maria realized why. The man's eyes were not reflective or shiny at all. They seemed more like eyes fashioned from clay. His head was mostly bald on top, but a ring of greasy black hair hung from his scalp and draped his shoulders. There was something altogether off about the man's proportions that Maria couldn't identify, but she found him immediately repulsive. He was just put together wrong. A thick stench surrounded the man like an aura, a pungent roadkill aroma. Being near him made her feel sick. Maria was about to leap the counter when she suddenly felt agonizing pain explode in her right calf. She glanced down and saw an enormous spider attached to her leg. Its abdomen alone was roughly the size of Maria's Jack Russell Terrier. Its mandibles released her leg, and twin spurts of blood jetted out after the fangs. In seconds, the entire leg was numb and useless. In fact, her whole body felt paralyzed to some degree. She could move, but only very sluggishly and with great effort. I'm going to die, she thought. The man came closer, his face only inches from her own now, and stroked her cheek gently with one clammy, pale finger.
Well, there, child. Don't go, don't go thinking about dying just yet. Old Puck just wants to talk to you is all. I'm not gonna hurt you, no, ma'am. Not just yet.
Hawk gripped her shoulders and lifted her from the ground easily, then carried her back out into the center of the store. Two more of the massive spiders came out from the back of the store carrying chairs on their hairy backs and deposited them in front of a faded cardboard Pepsi display. As Hawk lowered Maria into one of the chairs, her face came closer to his chest, and she saw the fabric of his shirt move as though something beneath the shirt had pressed against it, then readjusted. He had placed her in the chair facing the awful, fiery-eyed audience, and then Paul had lowered himself gently into the chair facing her, and sat now with his hands folded in his lap.
Well, I've been a poor host, and I do apologize. I haven't introduced myself. I am Puck Ederkop, and I'm pleased to welcome you to my station here.
He grinned at her expectantly and continued to stare at her with his dull, unblinking eyes.
Now, Maria, how are you and I supposed to have any sort of conversation when you won't speak up? I can look inside that juicy noggin of yours if I must, but it isn't fair to make Pauk do all the work.
Maria's lips were slow to form words, but she was able to ask, What what are you what are you going to do to me? Hawk didn't answer for a moment, just sat across from her like a statue. Maria could feel him rummaging around inside her mind. It was a violation akin to coming home to find a stranger pillaging your bedroom drawers. Her chair leaned backwards for a moment, and she felt the weight of one of the fat arachnids as it crawled up the back and across her shoulder. Its fat abdomen brushed Maria's cheek as the spider crawled down her chest and settled in her lap. She wanted so badly to shove the awful creature away, but she couldn't move. The effects of the venom were incredibly potent and fast moving. She was utterly paralyzed. The bite on her leg throbbed dully, and she felt heat radiating out from the wound. She didn't feel as though she was losing consciousness, though, and that was a good thing. If she was to have any chance of surviving this encounter, she would need to be able to think clearly. Paul shook his overlarge head briskly.
Hell, now there you go again, thinking too much about getting away from here when we've just started to get close. Now, you asked me what I intend to do with you. My dear, that is really up to you. Now, all those folks you saw out there in the yard, they had the same choice that I'm going to offer you tonight.
Paul leaned a bit closer.
They had a thing that I wanted, just like you have. And in the end, they all begged me to take it from them, young and old alike. They all told me they wanted me to have this thing. And in return, I'd give them what they wanted as well.
He laughed then. It was a strange sound void of mirth or joy. It sounded like a parrot attempting to mimic the laugh of its owner.
Even that dog, in its own way, made the choice to give me what I wanted. Its simple mind was easy to see into, much easier than yours. But then again, old Puck has always been a strong reader.
This last bit, he said with a smug grin while making a hearty thumbs up gesture with both hands. Maria swallowed and whispered, What is it you want from me?
Oh, it's not much, just, well, I know it's going to sound funny, I suppose, but it's your juice, your delicious essence. That's what I want. I want to drink you dry, my dear, every last drop of you. If you think about it, it really is a sweet thing to be wanted so badly.
You want to kill me? Why would I ask you to do that? What do I have to gain from letting you murder me? Maria felt some of the effects of the venom begin to fade. She thought that she could stand, maybe even walk if she tried. She had to keep him talking, give her body more time to fight off the paralysis. She also knew she didn't want her own thoughts to betray her. She began thinking of her father, her poor father in surgery right now. She wanted so badly to be by his side. She wanted to see him again.
Well, he's dead, you know.
Paul looked at her with an expression on his face of cartoonish, feigned sorrow.
Died on the operating table before you even pulled into my station, dear. He died with his chest opened up like a book. And you want to know what his last thought was before the anesthesia knocked him out? He thought about you, dear. His little girl so far away at school. And you know what that old stinker said to himself, his last thought on this earth? He said to himself, I bet Maria will fuss at me for not sticking to that diet plan she gave me.
You're lying. He's not dead. The hospital would have called if there was trouble.
Well, they tried calling you a number of times, but you'd been inside my perimeter for quite a few miles by that time, and I'm afraid we don't get very good reception around these parts.
For the first time, Paul didn't just look inside Maria's head. He deposited an image there. He showed Maria the face of her father in the moment just after life had slipped away from him. She wanted to believe that Paul was lying to her, but her heart knew different. Her father was gone. Tears flowed from her eyes and dripped off of her chin, splashing onto the bloated arachnid in her lap. Disturbed by the teardrops, the spider scuttled down Maria's leg to the floor. Hawk stood.
Here's my offer, dear. Let me drink you, and I will empty you of all that you are. You'll be like one of those outside, just a husk filled with a tiny bit of my life, which is infinite. You will be everlasting. And in return, the part that I take from you, once I've taken what is sweet to me, I will release into the beyond. You'll join your father on the other side. It's not going to hurt, no ma'am, not one bit. Not if you say yes to my offer. Not if you give yourself to me freely.
If I reject your offer, what then? Pop's face contorted into a hideous pantomime of sadness.
Yeah, well, I'd have to hurt you, dear. Yeah, I'd have to hurt you very badly.
Maria wasn't sure until she leapt from the chair whether she'd actually be able to move. As soon as she stood, the spider on her lap fell to the floor. Maria kicked it away from her as hard as she could. She grabbed the chair she'd been sitting in and swung it at Pock's head. He fell heavily onto his back and began convulsing wildly. His shirt burst open in a flurry of dark, hairy appendages. Pock's body flipped over, and Maria realized something horrible. He wasn't a man at all. His oversized head was actually the swollen abdomen of a spider. The pallid eyes with its false eyes protruded from the bottom of the spider, and the mouth was still speaking.
Oh dear, you made a bad choice!
He screamed. The spider's true face was revealed as it shook away the last of the clothes it had worn as a disguise. Hawk's many eyes glowed with the same light that shone in the skulls of the walking corpses outside the station. Each of its 8 legs terminated in very pale human hands. The spider bounded across the room quicker than Maria's eye could follow, closing the distance between them in seconds. She whirled and found herself staring into the pair of eyes that never blinked. The mouth of the false face opened, and a stream of thick, gummy webbing squirted from its lips. She raised her hand reflexively to protect her face. The webbing plastered her arms to her chest and held it like dried cement. Out of the corner of her eye, Maria saw a dark shape in motion. The spider she kicked was quickly charging at her from the front of the store, and another was perched on the shelves behind her about to pounce. With her free hand, she roundhouse punched Hawk. Her timing was accidentally fortunate, as the blow caused the next string of webbing to miss her and connect with the leaping spider on the shelves, leaving it immobilized. Maria ran for the front doors. Hawk crawled up the wall and across the ceiling, matching her step for step. He shot another blast of webs at her that stuck her foot to the floor. Her upper body fell forward and her face slammed into the tile floor, breaking her nose with a wet smack. The pain was immediate and enormous, but it also had the effect of honing her focus. The web was attached to her shoe and the leg of her jeans. As quickly as she could, Maria kicked off her other shoe and worked to free herself from her jeans, and the shoe still stuck to the floor. Hawk descended slowly from the ceiling on a rope-thick strand of web. Beneath the spider's head and fanged mandibles, a new orifice parted, and a transparent pinkish tube of flesh inched out. It extended from the spider's head about 4 feet and ended at a point like a large needle. She understood now why the figures outside had gaping holes where their mouths should be, and why the dog's muzzle was such a ruined mess. If Paul caught up to her, that needle was going into her face, and the massive spider was going to drink her dry, just like it had promised. She finally freed herself of her jeans, a difficult task to accomplish with one hand, and scrambled to the door. Her nose was pouring blood down the front of her shirt, and she could feel it swelling. The bite on her calf was beginning to hurt worse as well, slowing her to run to a half-limping hobble. She finally reached the doors and didn't risk a look back. She knew Pauk was after her. She wouldn't waste precious seconds by pausing to see how close he was to bringing her down. She figured she had more to fear from the danger out inside the station than she did from the figures crowded outside. If they were as emptied out as Pauk claimed, perhaps they had no will or motivation of their own. Maybe they would let her pass. It was a chance Maria was willing to take. She flung the doors open wide and dove into the mass of leathery flesh. None of the beings attempted to grab her or hold her back, but they didn't move aside easily either. Maria was forced to drop to her knees and crawl between their mummified legs. She could hear Pauk's voice screaming at her as the spider tried to force its way into the crowd.
You can't escape me! Nobody can! Nobody ever will!
She ignored him and concentrated on clearing the multitude of corpses. She couldn't stop when she reached her car. She didn't stop until she reached her car, whose keys were in her jeans pocket, back on the floor of the station. Suddenly she was out and stumbling to her feet. She didn't look back now and saw the spider a few yards away, tearing through the dead to get to her. It was ripping them apart with its mandibles. She had only moments before it would reach her. She glanced around, frantically looking for something, anything that would offer safety and escape. There was another figure at the station that hadn't been there before. It wasn't dark and grotesque like the others. In fact, this figure didn't seem fully there like the others. It was vaporous and transparent. Its eyes weren't lit like the same orange glow as the others. The figure was pointing at one of the trucks parked at the pump nearest the edge of the station. It was a Ford, not as old or rusty as most of the others. The door to the truck hung open. Some intangible thing in Maria's heart told her that she could trust this figure, that it was trying to help her, whatever it was. She ran for the truck. As she got closer, she could make out more details of the figure. It was a man, dark-skinned and dressed in a hospital gown. His chest was split open as if he had stepped out for a walk in the middle of a surgery. Her heart knew who this figure was even before she saw his familiar face. She looked into the kind, concerned eyes of her father one last time, and then he vanished. As he faded from view, she heard his voice whisper in her ear,
I love you, baby girl. I always have. Your mother sent me to keep an eye on you one last time. We'll be waiting for you. Now go live.
Tears were streaming down her face as she reached the truck, dragged herself into the cab, and slammed the door shut behind her. The ache in her heart was worse than any pain in her body, but she couldn't dwell on that yet. There would be time to process that loss later. The truck keys were still in the ignition, where some unfortunate soul had left them. The owner had stumbled into this trap just like she had, but they hadn't survived their encounter with Paul Enderkopf. She turned the key. The engine sputtered, but the truck didn't start. Webs hit the side of the truck with a loud smack. The spider had reached her and was attempting to trap her in the truck. She turned the key again and this time was rewarded with a rumble under the hood as the engine roared to life. The dash display glowed dimly back into wakefulness, and Maria threw the truck into drive and slammed her foot on the gas pedal. For a few seconds, the truck struggled to break free of the webs, then lunged forward. Maria steered away toward the on-ramp for the interstate. In the rearview mirror, she saw the station as it truly was, a dilapidated urban ruin at the center of an enormous spider's web. She reached the highway and pulled onto it, tires squealing. She glanced one last time at the rearview mirror. Gone now was the web. In its place, she saw the bright neon gas and grub sign rising from a well-lit and welcoming station. Just an illusion, she said. Maria sighed deeply and allowed herself to feel relief. On the heels of that feeling came thoughts of her father. She wept as she drove, crying harder than she had since she was a child, feeling his loss more deeply than the pain of all her physical wounds. She was so absorbed with her mourning that she didn't even hear the scratching of hairy legs in the bed of the truck as a spider the size of a small dog crawled over the tailgate and settled out of sight below the back window. A spider with a small pale spot on the bottom of its abdomen, roughly the shape of a human face. The end. All right.
Wow. Man, you both killed it. Megan, that was a great last minute read. John, you milked every moment of that. You were a great spider. Creepy,
Thank you.
creepy.
Yes, John's amazing. John brings it every time.
So, John, you have some things that you want people to know about you.
Yes, my latest short story is called Radio Such, and it's in this. How do I get this in here? In Switchblade number 12. Switchblade is one of the great new pulp magazine anthology series. There are guys out there who are doing their best to keep the hard-boiled tradition alive. This is a great series, and I'm very proud to be back in it. You can find it at Amazon or any of those outlets. Switchblade number 12. You can buy a copy for $8 or Kindle download for $3. So thanks so much for having me, guys. It was terrific being here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Y'all, John is a great writer. Like, we know him from Writers Group. His writing's solid. We're actually going to have him on this season too, and we'll plug the story again because he's somebody you want to check out.
Yes, John is a person of many trades. He's a wonderful actor and he's a wonderful writer. So we're excited that he's graced us with his acting skills, and also later in the season we will get to read his story.
Megan, high five! You did that last minute, girl.
Thank you. Well, is it easy? I mean, Josh makes it really easy, so I really have to give the kudos to him for his story.
Speaking of Joshua, so guys, I don't know what you were thinking when you listened to this short story, what you were actually seeing visually. So think back on that for a second, because I'm about to show you something.
Uh-oh. What are you going to do?
All right.
Ah!
This, Joshua is also a super talented artist. This is what he had envisioned for the piece. Look how creepy it is.
For those of you listening to the podcast, Joshua is a wonderful artist, and Jeremy's holding up a picture of these horrifically and wonderfully scary zombies that have the big hole in their mouth where the spider would stick its thing into them and like suck their soul out. And then now we're also holding up
this is the spider dude.
The spider dude, Paul, who has like the hair on his hair on his head, and then on the inside you can see his mandibles and you can see his body parts. It's really quite creepy, and I think really captures the tone
very talented
of this story. So I would suggest to Joshua that he needs to do this as a graphic novel. I mean, I think
Megan,
there, right?
We tripped up. We didn't put our timer, so we're gonna just maybe.
Oh my gosh!
do like a minute on our timer. Let's do 2 minutes. Let's just do 2 minutes. All right.
We just like totally didn't cranky. Poor Cranky's over here like, guys, you know what's going on.
So let's talk about the story, Megan. My favorite line in the whole piece, and John kills this line too, is it really is a sweet thing to be wanted so badly. I love it. I love that line.
I know. And that's also one of the lines that stuck out for me when John reads it. It's just hits home for me. Like it's definitely the type of villain that I love, like villains who believe that they are right. Like he doesn't believe he's a bad guy, right? Like he's like, I'm doing, you should be happy that I'm going to kill you because I want you so badly. And doesn't that make you feel good? It's like, oh my God, no, you're a psychopath spider. That doesn't make me feel good at all. And it just makes it that much creepier. Oh, yeah. It's so good. I'm just going to make sure that I didn't mess up with Cranky again. Okay. So I also just really love that scene where she gets out of the station and is crawling through the leathery guys. Like that, the imagery of that section is so powerful for me. And her like getting to her car and realizing her keys are in her jeans, and then seeing her father's image, like all of that is so specific and very brilliant, and I see it all, and it's so alive.
It's quite clever how he did everything too, because it's kind of like a spider web. Like if you think about it, she's going in there not seeing what it really is until she's caught. Kind of how a fly would be in a spider web. Like it's one thing until she's actually in the web.
Oh, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's very true. Like she's even a minute and a half and I'm still scared. Oh my gosh. Okay, so since we're just talking and rambling about Josh and how great his story is, why don't we bring him on? Joshua, are you there? Hi. Hey. Hi, welcome to the show. So before we get started, I just want to brag about you and tell people a little bit about you. So our author tonight is Joshua Adams. He is an elementary art school teacher in Johnsonville, South Carolina. In his spare time, he does graphic design and does all those beautiful drawings like Jeremy showed you guys. He is an avid reader and ultimately found himself writing. Many of his short stories can be found under Joshua Adams on medium.com, and I highly recommend that you guys check them out. He's got some really wonderful little stories in there that are just really great. So if you liked tonight's story, make sure that you check out his other work. So welcome, Josh. Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
Yeah, I'm muted.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Thank you so much.
We have a ghost, by the way. There's a ghost in StreamYard right now, and it is haunting the show.
It was a poltergeist, and it's wreaking havoc on all of our feeds at the moment.
Hey, it's all good.
Do you think it might be Dead Frankie?
I'm sorry, what?
You think it might be Dead Frankie?
It might be Dead Frankie. Yeah, he does like playing practical jokes. For those of you who don't know, I am currently roommates with a skeleton named Frankie, and he has his own Instagram, which is at New Adventures of Dead Frankie. If you guys are interested, and he likes to play practical jokes, so I think this has Frankie written all over it.
Now check it out.
So Joshua, what was the inspiration for this piece?
Well, I remember I had the idea about, there's certain insects and moths and things that have a false set of eyes on their wings, or they may look like a predator or look like. I thought, well, what if there was a spider that could pretend to be a person? That it's just that was the initial thought, and I said, would that even work? And I drew that sketch of like, would it even pass as a human if it was all, and I thought, yeah, actually that could pass for a human long enough to get somebody within the web, like you pointed out. And so that was kind of the initial inspiration for it.
It's interesting that you say that. There was a movie in the 90s, I think, where there's this creepy insect that lives below ground. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Mimic. I think.
Mimic, yes.
Yeah.
It was one of the scariest movies because it was an insect that like pretended to be a human. But something about that is so creepy. And I guess it's arachnid. It's not an insect, but it's a bug trying to be a person.
Yeah, I think my other inspiration too, and I love John Carpenter's The Thing. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And I remember the first time that I saw the defibrillator scene, and everything just out of nowhere, the mouth and it's open, and it just the visceral reaction to that transformation. I wanted to have a moment where we realize that this person is not really a person, and it's shocking. So I started there and then just built a story that would get me to that scene.
I love that twist. It's disturbing.
Yeah, and I really love hearing how writers get these little nuggets of inspiration. Like I feel like a lot of times we're asked, how do you get your inspiration, or where do you get your inspiration? But it's never just one thing. You get sort of a spark, and then, or you find something that like you wanted to do something that mimicked what you saw in The Thing. Like you're really use your words, Megan. You were really taken by this whole idea of like something becoming something that you don't think it is, and you just ran with it in a way that's very different than The Thing. And I love to hear stories like that about where writers find their inspiration. That was really cool. Like, will you tell us some of your other like horror inspirations, or some of your favorite movies or stories that you've read?
That could take a while. I mean, anything horror. I'm a huge horror fanatic. In books, I love Stephen King. I think I love. He was always good at writing these long, enormous novels, but he could also come down to a really short story and establish characters really quickly that you cared about, and establish just this weird, scary thing that's happening, and that character having to deal with it and keeping it concise. And I thought that was it's always an interesting challenge. So definitely Stephen King, a lot of other authors. I love House of Leaves. I don't know if y'all have ever read that book, but Matthew, I can't pronounce his last name, Danielewski or something like that. It's a
Oh, no, I'm not familiar. I'll have to check it out.
Oh, it's fantastic. But
it's funny, Joshua, that you mentioned Stephen King. When me and the other producer, Mark, were reading your story, we thought it could totally fit into an anthology of Stephen King's work. So,
well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Nice compliment.
So are you into being scared? Like, is there something that really scares you? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't like spiders. I actually
okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
I don't like spiders very much. And I'm a true crime nut. So I read true crime constantly, and then I read too much of it, and then I don't want to go out and take the trash out because you read enough that you get paranoid and like, oh, there's a serial killer outside. I just know it.
What was
That's so true. I feel like I do that too, where I'm like, I'm in a situation and I'm like, this feels like the beginning of a true crime documentary.
This is where I find the body, and then they find me a month later.
Right.
It's so pungent, it stays with you. Like, you feel like you have just killed someone, you know?
Exactly.
What was the hardest part for you to write, Joshua, in this piece?
The hardest part about this story was I knew going in that this character is a spider, and I wanted to have hints along the way that he wasn't normal, but how much to put in and how much to hold back, that was the balance, because you don't want it to completely come out of nowhere and feel undeserved in the story, but at the same time, you know, you've got to lay those hints in there really carefully because you don't want to blow the surprise. So, you know, you had that moment where the shirt was kind of shifting on, like she could see something under his shirt moving a little bit. And, you know, and in my mind, the fact that he showed up, it's like he just appeared there. In my mind, he was up there in the ceiling somewhere the whole time. He just kind of dropped down real quietly, like a spider does. So that was the hardest thing, the balance of hinting at it without spoiling it.
Well, the thing that I love about Stephen King's work and other horror writers' work, and I think you captured this really well in the story, is letting us realize things at the same time that the character we're following or is realizing it. Like, as Maria, like, I think you doled out that information really well, because Maria's figuring it out at the same time we're figuring it out, and we're on the same page. And then, you know, so that reveal is a reveal for us, but also it's a reveal for Maria, and that connection, I feel like, is just really powerful in narrative. So I thought you did that really well.
Thank you.
It was definitely in the story.
Yeah. Well, Josh, is there anything else that you'd like to say about your story, or any other nuggets you want to give us?
Well, one of the things that was fun about this story was Maria, you know, as a character. It's all, you know, you ask what's challenging. You know, it's challenging to write a character that reacts to a scary situation with intelligence and still have it be scary for them. You know, she's definitely not Superwoman, but she does think on her feet. You know, she trusts her instincts. Like, when she initially, of course, she's distracted, there's so much going on, but when she walks out the door and realizes something's not right, and you know, she listens to that voice that says, all right, you better be careful because this isn't and, you know, everywhere, you know, at every point in the story, I tried to think, what would I do if I was in this situation? So having her think, you know, I can move a little bit. So if I just wait until it wears off a little bit more, maybe I can make it to the door. Maybe I can make it to the, you know, so it was fun to have a character that was smart, but wasn't just like Ellen Ripley with the flamethrower kind of thing. It was, you know, fun to see her, you know, work her way out of that problem, you know, in a believable way, I think.
And you kept her alive, and that's what I really was happy about.
Yes, absolutely. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I do feel like, at least when I read stories about like women like being badass, I feel like there's this tendency, oh, well, they're a badass, so they don't listen to their intuition, or they don't listen to the emotional side of themselves. And so I really liked that Maria listening to that part of herself is actually what helps her in this story and really gives her those layers and complexity as a character and makes her more relatable. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really appreciate y'all choosing the story. Hopefully, maybe we can put another one up here sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We would love to have more of your stories here. We are a fan. So please keep sending them to us. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua.
Through tonight. And so I think that's going to wrap us up for the interview portion. So thank you again. Everybody, if you want to read more of Josh's stories, please find him on medium.com under Joshua Adams. As I mentioned before, he's got some real gems on there. So enjoy. Thank you, Joshua.
Joshua, thank you.
Yeah, bye. Good night.
Good night.
All right. So episode 3 in the bag.
Done.
There we go.
In the grave.
In the grave. I like that. Yeah. So if you haven't already, please go to our YouTube page and like and subscribe. For season 3, we would like to get up to 100 subscribers. So please tell your friends and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find us, as always, we're on audio podcasts and we are on Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. We're on Amazon Music and also, which one am I forgetting? Spotify.
We're on all of the ones that matter.
Yeah, we're a big deal. You can also find us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook. If you want to throw us some Twitter love, please use the hashtag NRSS podcast. And Jeremy, you want to tell them about the merchandise?
Sure do. If you like gold and purple, you'll like our merchandise because we got a lot of it. It helps, honestly, to make... the producer said I must show the pillow. So I'm going to show the pillow right now.
So Jeremy's holding up this wonderful pillow. It's got a black background and it's white and orange and purple NRSS all over it. It's the perfect, we're coming into the holidays. So it's the perfect holiday gift for your story lover to keep them comfortable over the holidays.
And it helps us make this podcast happen.
Absolutely. So all the proceeds from our merchandise will go to our overhead on the podcast, and then anything extra we are donating to literary programs in Los Angeles. So not only are you helping us out, but you're helping out people in the city.
Megan has a great website. You should check out meganamorrison.com if you want some more good writing. She'll have updates on her work as she has them.
And Jeremy has a newsletter where you get a micro story every single week. So you can sign up to that on jeremyraystories.com, and they are delightful. So it's so cool to get a little new story in my inbox every week. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of that. Because where else do you get that? Nowhere. jeremyraystories.com.
And then let's plug Melanie too. Like, we had a wonderful performer on this show.
Yes.
And unfortunately, because of the ghost, the poltergeist.
So Melanie Thompson is wonderful. You will see her again on the show moving forward, hopefully. You can find her at melaniethompson.net. She is an actor, a model, a writer, and a filmmaker. So please check out all of her wonderful things on her website, and hopefully you will get to see a full performance from her very soon.
She's so good. You want to check that out.
I'm very heartsick that you guys didn't get to experience her wonderful talent, because she does a fantastic job.
And then we have our next episode, which I'm really excited about too. It's our very own Britton Valenti.
Yes, guys.
CMU.
Please come back next week. We have a wonderful story called Food Baby from the one-of-a-kind Britton Valenti. You do not want to miss this story. She's going to perform it herself, and it's going to be fantastic. So we will see you right here next Monday night. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween!
No one reads short stories anymore. I really don't know what they're written for. Go right write a short story and throw it out the door. 'Cause no one reads short stories, funny, sad, or gory. No one reads short stories anymore. Yes, no one reads short stories anymore.